Welcome everyone to another video. Today a special one and somehow a next part of the F9, because today I have both cars on the lift and I want to show you how similar they actually are. So it all started with the F9, like you could see in the other parts of this video series. And today we have cars on the road like the Phaeton, for example, which have the same concept. So let's take a look underneath. So like I described in my earlier video, where I described the whole history of the F9, it all started with the F9. So this is the VW Beetle competitor, and we have it on the lift now. So let's take a look around here. Like we said, it's the basis of a lot of cars we have on the streets today, including my VW Phaeton. And you can see the front overhang is not really that long, but that's also because the engine is right here. So if we leave that open, you can see how far forward the engine actually sits, and it's actually quite a nice design that's covering this front hanging engine with these 3 cylinders here. So you can see the 3 spark plugs here. All of that happens in front of the front axle, right? So you can see the radiator is pretty much on the front axle, and we can also see it if we look inside here. So that is the front axle with the leaf spring. The drive shafts are also here. This greasy thing here is the steering, which we still need to fix. I currently took the exhaust off, so we will build a new exhaust from the primaries all the way to the back. You can see the bell housing. So the bell housing is in front of the front axle. That's important because that was a thing they designed in 1935, or started this design in 1935. And they only changed that with the Audi B8, so with the A4, which came out in 2007. So as I described in the other video, but that was pretty long time state of the art. Also, if you think about the rally Audis, the Group B cars, pretty nicely you can see the gearbox hanging behind the front axle here. And this is, like I said before, a concept which was taken over by the Porsche construction of the Grand Prix car, the Audi Union, Auto Union Type A, B, C of the 1930s. So if we look underneath, you can see the bell housing, you can see the drive shafts over here, and you see the engine right there. So, I mean, there's still a lot of work to do on this car, but I guess you see everything in terms of the concept of the car. And yeah, so this is the F9 on the lift. And let's have a look how the others look like. So what we see here now is the VW Phaeton. So much newer car than the F9. It came on the market 60 years after the F9, but still the same concept. First of all, you can see the long overhang. So you see the front axle here. You see the engine here, and this is the gearbox cover with parts of the gearbox here. So gearbox is still behind the front axle, engine is in front of the front axle, and it looks like it's a transversal engine, but it's actually a longitudinal, just the oil pan is that shape. And have to apologize, it's a 300,000 kilometer diesel car, so it looks a bit dirty. But let's take a look underneath here. So you can see the front axle. First of all, the front axle changed massively because the F9 was promoting the front wheel drive, and because of that, the front axle was always a big topic for the companies that used this concept. So for Auto Union and then later Audi, and today all other manufacturers that are using it. And so the standard simple front axle wasn't really good because you always had too much like disturbance in the steering because of the front wheel drive. So what Audi did at the beginning of the 1990s was they designed this four link suspension. So you can see one link here, and one link here. This is the one that's holding the whole load, so that's why the damper is connected to here. And this is the one, wait, this one. This, in German it's called Führungslenker, so this is the one which keeps the front suspension in position. So the trick that Audi did here was that you can see it has two connection points here. So it's not one wishbone, these are two independent wishbones. And they did this so the center of the steering axle is actually not here in one point. You have to extend that, so from this bearing to the other bearing, and then extend that line, which means the center of the steering axis is somewhere in the middle of the wheel or even outside. And by doing that, you can reduce the all the forces coming from the front wheel drive into the steering. But you have to design this super complicated front suspension, and other manufacturers needed a long time to work this out. There are also two additional links at the top, which you can see there. Same thing there, so it's not a single top wishbone, these are two separate ones, so you have a artificial steering axis that's going in space through the wheel, and that's how they could run front wheel drive and still have very low disturbance in the steering. So that was one of the big revolutions at the beginning of the 1990s. The next thing is that this car still has the engine and the clutch package, or the torque converter, in front of the front axle and the gearbox behind it. In 2007 that changed with the Audi A4 B8, and they actually swapped the position, so this the clutch is then behind the front axle, so the whole engine can be further back, and we have a lot more space here. And keep in mind, this is the smallest engine for this car, so that's a V6, the 3-liter V6 diesel engine. Going to the back, you can see there's still a lot of space because it's designed for bigger engines, W12 and V10s. And the good thing is, because the gearbox is already here, so we are already behind the front axle, the way to the rear is pretty clear. So we can just connect the prop shaft to the back, which is what Audi did back in the day, and that was the beginning of the Quattro era. So we have all-wheel drive, and it's a very good concept to have all-wheel drive. Back in the day, Audi was using the same front axle at the rear axle to create a very simple drivetrain. Here we have a very complicated one now. So it's in German it's Trapezlenkerachse, so it's a multi-link suspension with one large lower wishbone, which is actually quite good for aerodynamics. Very stable, very capable, much more capable than the early Audi Quattro rear axles. And if we compare it to the F9, the F9 just had the transversal leaf spring and just a live axle at the back, so very, very simple axle. And yeah, that's another big revolution of the concept. You can also see, because we have all-wheel drive and we have exhaust and prop shaft going to the back, the fuel tank is split in two, so we have a fuel tank on each side, so we have space in the middle. The F9 had the fuel tank in front, or the early models like mine have it in front, the later models have it at the back. And yeah, so the concept was developed a lot further, and it's a big step from the 1930s to today. So one thing that's special about the Phaeton is this extremely long front overhang, and then they tried to like cover that with the design of the car. So it has a very pointy nose. So actually it doesn't really look like the overhang is so long because the front light already starts here, but then it's going a long way forward, and that's always what's surprising you when you're parking the car. We can see the two separate upper wishbones here, and you can also see the higher lying steering, because the steering rack is lying on top of the gearbox here with this older design. And then with the next generation, they moved it down, and then it was called 5-link front suspension instead of 4 links, because the track rod was the additional link. Another thing that's quite familiar is is very similar to the F9. If you look inside here, you can see that behind the grille there is the first radiator, or in this case it's the condenser of the air conditioning system. So it doesn't really take long in an impact to hit something that is expensive. So like the cooling package is very far in front, so the car can't be much shorter. The overhang is super long. You can see from the license plate to the first radiator to the condenser, it's not a long way. And that's why this concept is always a bit more expensive in terms of insurances, because insurances say when you crash this car, it's very likely that you hit something expensive. Okay, and with the engine cover, it looks like this. So here's also one special thing that's due to the concept. You can see this air outlet is the so-called Faton outlet, because it was special for this car and others didn't have it. So Audi A8, for example, didn't have it first, but they developed it for the Phaeton because the engine is sitting so far forward. So you can see front axle is around here. This is where the oil pan sits, and here's the cooling package. And the engine is sitting so far forward that there's not so much space for the air to like stream freely out of the cooling package, because there's the big engine block behind it. Here it's not so extreme because it's just a V6, but if you have a V10, for example, there's not so much space, and they run into cooling issues, and because the air can't freely stream out of the radiator package. So to make some space, they let the air out between radiator package and front axle and engine. And I mean, aerodynamically, it's a thing you don't really want to do because you blow air down, which increases front lift, but for a 2-ton car, it doesn't really matter too much. So it's not really a problem, but you solve your cooling issues. So this Faton outlet is special for this car, and it's also due to this concept. Another interesting thing you see here is there are these two inlets, here and here, and they're actually for the gearbox cooling. So they go through the engine cover, then through the gearbox cover, and then blow onto the gearbox. So it's not brake cooling. Brake cooling is done with these front diffusers. I mean, of course, it's not a race car, but it works like a diffuser. It's pumping air inside here. And then we even have these hands. So yeah, in Formula One, we would call it hand inlet. So we have this, this visor here to get the air to the front brakes. But yeah, pretty cool details. And here is a little exhaust of the diesel turbine. So to heat the car up quicker and for the, yeah, like to heat the car when it's stationary. Yeah, so lots of nice details on this car. And a big change to what we saw on the F9. So as you could see, both are very similar. We still have the same concept like it was designed in 1935. That's when the development for the DKW F9 started, the big Beetle competitor. Almost forgotten today, but that's why we do this video series. And today we have cars like the Phaeton, which was designed like at the end of the 1990s. But we also have new cars like Lamborghini Urus, Porsche Cayenne. They all have the same concept. Now we have much bigger engines. We have still the engine in front of the front axle. That's why we have this front biased nose distribution. We have all-wheel drive today. And even Bentleys with large W12 turbo engines have this concept. So I hope you found that interesting. You can see where the concepts we have today come from, and also how they developed from the 1930s until today. So see you at the next video.